Well, welcome. I have before me Annette Parsons and Jim Clover, and you are two of just the legends of riding tie for lots of reasons that we're going to start. We're going to talk about in a little bit, but I want to just really jump right in. You've been involved in riding tie for more than 35 years. Tell me how you first got involved in the sport.
Well, it's a different story. Did you hear the question? Okay, it's a different story for each of us. I got involved in 1983 when I lived in Humboldt County, and the Ruprecht family lives in Humboldt County, and I knew them from endurance riding, and they had been doing riding tie for a few years at that point, and the championship was held in Eureka that year, and I just thought they were crazy. Anybody who was going to get off their horse and run was a nut. So, but she talked me, Joan Ruprecht talked me into it, and I did it, and that's all it took. I just got hooked, and as you know, you hear this from a lot of people when you talk to them, they got hooked.
Yeah, indeed. How about you, Jim?
Well, sort of the same story. I was a runner too, and I was into endurance running, and that's I've got a story about that as well, but I was working in California and covering the North Coast, and I would work with Joan Ruprecht. She was with the county health department in Humboldt County, and I would see her occasionally, and we'd be talking, and she said, "You ought to do a riding tie." Sure. What is it? And they had a daughter named Elaine, who's quite famous in the circle now, who didn't feel much like running. She liked to ride a lot. They wanted her to do a riding tie. And she had done one, didn't really get excited about it. They set us up to do a riding tie at Cuneo Creek, where the championship was this year. And the evening before the race, I got on the horse, and I hadn't been on a horse for 30 years at that point. And I rode around the camp a little bit, said, yeah, I can do this. Mm-hmm. So Elaine and I did that riding tie the next day, and I learned a lot right away. I learned I could outrun a horse downhill. I had no idea that was possible, but you know that by now too. And I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. You have to, the one thing about riding tie and endurance running and endurance riding, running is sort of one-dimensional. You've got to be concerned about yourself, basically. And there are a lot of aspects to that, but it's yourself. Endurance riding, you got two people. It's two-dimensional, in other words. You've got one person and one horse, and you got to take care of each other. Riding tie, a whole different ballgame. It's three-dimensional. You've got two partners. There's three of you. And you have to think not just about your physical being, but taking care of the others, and the strategy involved is a whole different challenge and very exciting. And so at that point, I was hooked after doing one. It was good.
That's great. And I understand that you guys did not also discover a lifelong sport, but you discovered lifelong love through riding tie. Tell me that story if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So, as we both said in our individual stories, we both knew Joan Ruprecht, and I knew her from endurance, and she knew him from work because he worked for the state health department, and we didn't live in the same town. But anyway, she knew we had both recently been through split ups of long-term relationships, and she finally asked me one day, "Are you ready to start dating again?" I said, "Well, not really, but what do you got?" And so she set us up on a blind date. And that was how she actually got both of us into riding tie, and also got us into our relationship. And we started running and riding together, just little short fun riding ties. And I stole him from Elaine Ruprecht, partner, and then I married him.
Oh, that's just so great. So great. I love that story. Thank you. Well, by my count, between the two of you, you've completed 11 world championships together. And then Jim has 18 total completions, and Annette has 16. And you both have over 1,000 competitive miles in riding tie. And so that obviously makes you the elite of the elite. And I should mention, I should have told you this earlier, but I'm almost a little intimidated talking to you guys because y'all are just so incredible. So you stole Jim from Elaine as a partner. Tell me about your first championship together. Either one of you, whichever one's starting.
What was our first championship together was 1990 Trinidad, also Humboldt County, also my backyard, and that was I had Reflection, that horse who has 5 championships under his cinch, and he was older by then. I don't know, he was probably 16 or 18, which, as you know, for an Arab is not old. He was 3/4 Arab, 1/4 quarter, great horse. My first riding tie horse. And he was looking, pretty low key in the vet line as we were waiting to vet in. That was the year there were almost 200 finishers. So it was a large field, and he was hanging his head, falling asleep. All these other Arabs were firing, spinning around, and I needed to go visit the porta potty, so I asked Jim to hold the lead rope, and he gave me this eye-rolling look, and it really, you want me to be seen with this? Because he was a very competitive runner. I mean, he was still doing 100-milers when we met, and he was very competitive. Let me just leave it at that. And so anyway, afterwards, though, he was really pleased with Fleck. Because he got us through. We got our national point champion. No, that was 92. Never mind. We were 4th man woman that year. I think we just missed 3rd. I can't remember. But anyway, top 25. So he sang Fleck's praises after that.
I'm standing there holding him, and at the start of a race, you're looking around at your competitors and thinking, boy, they look pretty fit, or wow, how can I compete with these? I was looking at Fleck, and he just kind of sway backed and just kind of hang dog. And I go, oh boy, this is going to be a lot of fun. He was great. He was great. The race started, he knew what it was, and he did. The only bad part was when Annette tied him to a spot where there was a yellow jacket nest.
Oh no.
Stomping around and got him excited. And when I got there to untie the horse, it was a trip. But after the race, the first thing I did was apologize to Fleck. Great.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And those horses do just become almost an equal third partner on the team. It's amazing how
Absolutely.
They learn that game quick. And he did. He'd done a lot of endurance. I'd done 50-milers on him and some LDs when I started him. And he knew the game. He learned the game of riding tie really fast. I think they really like having those short breaks.
I do too. Yeah. I don't know if you've had this experience. I bet you have, where you're riding along, all of a sudden they just stop and kind of put their head next to a tree. Time me here. No, it's not yet. Not time yet.
Yeah, well, I think when they feel me gathering up the lead rope when I'm hanging a tree, getting ready, they know that.
Yep.
So yeah, they definitely kind of prepare themselves.
There's something about the way, even I think sometimes I just shift my weight unconsciously, and I mean, but I'm starting to look for a tree, and they can tell. It is amazing. Yeah. Okay, good. So we're talking a little bit about reflection or reflect. Tell me, 5 completions. Was all 5 with the 2 of you, or with somebody else?
No, my first riding tie in '93, Eureka, was on Fleck at Reflection, and it was with a woman named Debbie Kelsey, she was my partner that year, and we'd never done one, and she had been a runner in high school, and I hadn't, but I started running to train for that. And so we I trained Fleck also. We had to train him to learn to stand tied when other horses went by. So she would ride her horse by. So we did all that. And he was great. The only problem was he learned, to stand quietly tied to the tree. And when I came along about 2 miles from one of the mid-race vet checks, I was looking at what I thought were his hoof prints because I knew, looking at my watch, that it was about time. I mean, I was still new to this sport, but we were developing, and we ran long distances in those days. We would sometimes go 4 miles between exchanges, or 5. Nowadays, well, we haven't done one in a few years, but nowadays we go half a mile, maybe a mile. But you got really far apart from your partner, so you didn't see each other as often. And I was looking what I thought were his hoof prints, and I kept jogging, looking at the dust in the road. And he was standing so quietly by the tree. He had turned himself around and was shielded a little bit by some branches. Went right on by.
Oh, wow.
I came into the vet check. My crew says, "Where's your horse, Parsons?" I just went, okay. I turned around and went back. That is a very depressing, discouraging, if you've ever done it.
Oh, yeah.
All the racers are going this way and you're going back. Oh, and they're all going, oh man, bummer. So, but he was a champ, and we finished, I don't know, 120 something, I think. So we were not, we were out there for over 7 hours. You had, back in those days, that was Levi's, and it was a 40-mile race, and we had 8 hours. We had to finish within 8 hours. So we made it with a little bit to spare, but not much. Was a champ.
And the entrance, there were how many? 180 or?
Yeah, finishers. There were more that entered, and quite a few didn't finish for various reasons, but 180 some, I think, finished that year.
So tell me about that a little bit, because the biggest race I've been in probably had 35 or so entrants. I think that would have been the 49th World Championship. What is it like to start 150 or 180 or 200 horses in riding tie?
You ever been to a rodeo?
Yeah, time or two.
It's pretty wild.
It's pretty much a stampede, and the logistics of where to host when you have a big field like they're much more difficult, because you have to find a place where you can have 100 or 200, 150, whatever horses, and that many runners start all at once. And
another important thing, if you've got a lot of horses like that, you want to have a hill right away to slow everybody down a little bit, and get, they got to get the bejeebers out of the horses, and that a hill will do that.
Uphill, downhill.
Right. Yeah. Well, another horse that you have, I think, if I look, and Annette, we're going to talk about your book in a little bit, but just going through your book, Bones was one of your horses. I believe has 7 completions. Tell me about Bones.
Bones was my first horse, and I got him to do Tevis Cup, but right away we learned, and before I did Tevis, we did riding ties on him. And he was an amazing, he had come off the track. He was a racehorse, an Arab, and didn't win enough races for the owner, so we sold him. And a veterinarian friend of ours called and said, "Hey, I understand you want to do Tevis. I think I've got a horse for you." And we went down and looked at him, and he was a youngster then, but really beautiful horse, gray with dark points, and mane and tail. And he was smooth. He was really, we called him a Cadillac, because he just, if you've ridden endurance rides or riding ties on a rough horse, it's not very comfortable. And Bones was just you couldn't hardly post on him. He was so smooth. And so we trained him for riding ties, and he was, of course, wonderful. He was the best of the 3 partners, easily. He was one of those animals, whether they're human or horse or cow or whatever. He was an athlete, and you could look at him and see that. And he was great. He did all the other things too. We could pack on him. We could, if kids came over, and he was very competitive. If kids came over, he's the horse we could put them on safely. And you know, he was just a great horse. Annette did a ride and tie on him, sort of, where she and her cousin and Bones and a little mule that we had backpacked the state of Oregon on the PCT, the Pacific Coast Trail.
Pacific Coast Trail.
Yeah, Crest Trail. And she and her cousin would switch off on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially a ride and tie.
We weren't racing, but
Yeah.
ride 2 hours, hike 2 hours, ride, you know. And Bones
He was so versatile.
took it all in
just did it.
stride.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
My experience, I'm not the ultra runner that you are, Jim, but boy, a great horse can make you look so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bones, he was definitely a champ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Let me back up if it's okay.
yes.
I forgot to finish Reflection
Oh,
story.
I'm sorry. No, keep going.
Of his 5 completions, I think only one of those was with Jim, and that was 1990 Trinidad. The others, I did 86 Big Creek over by Santa Cruz, California, with another woman, Sherry Skillwoman, and then I did 89 Fraser Park, California, with a woman named Laura Lambert, and then in 92. The year that we rode Bones and we were point champions, and woman, two women friends of mine, Cheryl Soto at the time, and Janice Gordon rode Fleck in that championship. So actually, of his 5, only one was of us together.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's neat. That's neat.
Yeah.
and how would you-
No, I was Bones.
Oh yeah, okay, that's true.
Yeah. We'll get to that one. That was a fun one.
So one of the things that I love about the ride and tie community is that you get to camp, and when you got some downtime, people just kind of hang out together, and you just tell all the old stories again and again. And so we're around the campfire right now. I don't know your stories, but tell me some of your stories with either the two of you or other ride and ties you've had that just, and I know we can't do them all, but tell me some of the things that really leap out at you.
Well, I'll start with one that follows on my story of running past
Mhm.
Reflect. The next championship, next Levi's I did was 86 Big Creek with Sherry. And I had done a local ride and tie in 85 with Sherry on him and ran past him again. I did. I was paranoid. And this was way back before a lot of the technology we have nowadays. I was desperate for some device that would alert me to when I was close to him, something that he would wear and I would wear. And I never did figure anything out I could afford at that time. So what I did was I bought what was small for the days, but it was a little cassette tape recorder, about, I don't know, 3 inches by 5 inches, and put David Grisman tape in there. And whoever tied the horse, when they dismounted, before they ran off, they had to push the button on that and play the music. So, I could go along and hear David Grisman, and I knew my horse was nearby. I did not run past him that year. So that's one. You've got 93 Arroyo Grande was pretty exciting.
That was, yeah, Arroyo Grande,
93.
down in the middle of California on the coast, sort of. That was probably the best race we ever had, and we didn't win. But it was a close race for the first man, woman, and we were right behind the people who won for, I don't know, 4 miles at the finish or something like that, and we couldn't quite catch them. But it was just one of those things that we did our best, and it was a really good competition. We lost it, but it was a good one.
And that was Steve Shaw and his wife, Eileen Johnson, who a few years later passed away in a car accident. But they were very competitive.
Yeah.
And so we were really excited find ourselves right up there with them vying for first man woman team. And they edged us out by 30 seconds. And it was such a great race.
It was.
Those really close finishes where you're just working so hard, and those are so memorable. And then and one of the things I love, and I know this is true for you guys too about riding tie, is you cross the finish line and you've been competing like crazy for hours, but as soon as you cross, it's over, and you just chat and have a great time, and it's just wonderful. Yeah.
Way too often we have something like that, and we want to blame somebody for something that went wrong.
Yeah.
There was no blame here. We did our best. They did their best. It was just an excellent race.
It's such an exhilarating feeling when the three of you cross that finish line. There's nothing I've ever experienced like it. I have to one more story.
Oh, please. Yeah. Keep going.
This was, it was 1991 in Taylorsville. And I had a new horse, and she had done some local riding ties, a little Morab mare, Morgan Arabian mare, beautiful little bay. And endurance and riding tie really turned out to not be her gig.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she just really wasn't into it. And Jim was still very competitive, and I was getting more so because I had teamed up with him a few times and we had done well. So we used Sister. Her name was Sister that year, and she had a bad horse day. I don't know if she was in heat or what, but she just was, her heart was not in it. And she wasn't giving us her everything. And Jim was running hell-bent for leather, and I would have a really hard time catching him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd catch up to him and I'd say, you've got to slow down. I'm overriding the horse trying to catch you, and, we're not going to finish. And he was just getting madder, and I was getting madder. And there was one stretch when I was on the ground and we were going up this long grade, and I was in tears. I was so mad, and I was just crying. And Joan Ruprecht came flying by on her horse, and she goes, how's it going? And she's always upbeat and cheerful. And I said, I'm never doing another riding tie with that man as long as I live. And Joan just flipped her elbows in the air and she says, ha ha, been there, done that. And she galloped away. And I have to say that made me laugh a little.
Yeah.
And even though we didn't speak to each other for 3 weeks after that, when we were living in different cities, we finally did, and later got married. So it all worked out. But, there are some of those.
Yeah, that it was very frustrating because we had spent, both of us, a lot of time riding that horse, and she was in good condition. Yeah. But mentally, she wasn't there that day. No.
Yeah. Part of the game. You just never know. Somebody's gonna be down there watching. Yep.
Yeah.
Any other stories come to mind?
Well, I just want to highlight the 1994. I'm looking at my crib notes.
Yep.
1994 World Championship in Taylorsville, California, when for the first time in the history. So that 94 would have been what, the 24th, I guess. All right, do my math right. For the first time in the history of the sport, a woman was on the overall winning team. That was a man-woman team with Mark Rickman, an incredible national class, world-class runner, and an amazing horse named Eli. His horse is in the Ride and Tie Hall of Fame. And a woman named Debbie Wagner from Utah. And she and her husband were both fierce competitors, really competitive. So she teamed up with Mark and Eli that year, and they won. So that was the first time a woman was on the winning team. It was always men. Then in I guess it was 2009 at Humboldt Redwoods, Cuneo Creek, Humboldt Redwoods State Park. Suzanne Andriotti Rowland and her sister Michelle Andriotti, they're daughters of Dave Andriotti, who was a fabulous riding tire back in the 80s and 90s, and I think into the early 2000s. They won overall. So that was the first year a woman team won overall. So those were both really exciting years for all of us in Ride and Tie. And I have a little table in the book that I know we'll talk about in a minute. I'll just hold it up here.
Yep.
50 Years of Madness. The title comes from Bud John's book, What is This Madness? He wrote in about 85 or 87. Anyway, there's a little table in there that shows, it has blue dots for the man teams, pink dots for the woman teams, and green triangles for man-woman. And if you look at just the placement of those dots on the graph over time, you can see that the pink dots or squares or whatever they are get closer to the higher placings over the years. So women have become a lot more competitive in sport since the 70s. And interestingly, I think you mentioned this in one of your videos, the 1971, the first year of the riding tie, was women were not even allowed in the Boston Marathon.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't allowed in a lot of endurance running sports. So riding tie included women. And everybody competes on the same playing field.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty exciting to see how the women have become much more competitive over the years.
That is, and it is exciting to have a sport that it doesn't matter. You're out there competing against everybody. And I mean, I've gotten my tail kicked many a time by women teams or whatever, and that's great. And I love it. And
Yeah.
so I think it adds so much to the sports. You don't have we have the different categories, but you're all competing together. And then that's so great. Yeah. I'm with
Right.
you all the way on that one.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears for a second. Jim, you are in an elite of the elite category. Less than 50 people have done the triple crown of riding and running, and that is completing the Western States 100-mile endurance ride, which is, of course, the Tevis Cup, the 100-mile Western States endurance run, which we know came out of the endurance ride, and then the World Riding Tie Championship. When you think about it, we celebrate marathon runners. The original marathon was a guy that ran 26 miles and died. You've run 100 miles solo. You've ridden 100 miles. You've done the riding tie back and forth, the riding tie championships all these years. And so that makes you beyond human. You're at least a Greek demigod, if not a god. And so I have a few questions for you. Did you set out to do that, or did it just kind of happen, and when did you realize maybe if it did kind of happen that you were gonna, this was a goal for you?
Well, it just sort of happened. I started running when I was about 35. I've been involved in sports all my life, but running was not something that really interested me. And I went to a gymnasium in Sacramento where I was living at the time, and a guy was giving a talk on Western States 100. And I was sitting there listening to him and thinking, ran 100 miles across the Sierra Nevadas, molehill, and thinking, I could do that. And I remembered, while I was sitting there, I remembered reading a book when I was about 12 years old about Kit Carson and how he had run 100 miles to let the people at the fort know that they were going to be attacked and so on and so forth. I misremembered it, but that's what I was thinking at that point. I'm thinking, yeah, I could be a hero, Walter Mitty, I could be a hero and do that. And so the next day I went out and I ran 2 miles, like it killed me, of course. I had in mind right from the get-go to run 100 miles to run Western States. And 2 years later, I did. And so, I have that background. I was running 100 milers right off the bat, basically. And then I met the Ruprechts and they got me into riding tie, which was my next event. And I realized, wow, there's a lot more to just running. And I started doing endurance riding. So my progression was the 100-mile run first, and then the riding tie second and third to do Tevis. And, I learned an awful lot from that. I learned that virtually anybody could do that if they really want to.
Oh.
I'm no Superman at all. A lot of it is mental, and you have to want to do something like that. But I have met people who have run 100 miles with a withered leg. with handicaps that I don't know if I could hold on to. It's incredible what people are capable of doing. And I'm over 80 now, and I know in my head, if I had to run 100 miles, I could do it. It may take me several days now, but I could do it. And I think most people can't think that far ahead yet because they don't know what they're capable of doing until they see that somebody else is doing that. That's what I think the challenge in Ride and Tie right now is if we can do things like the Equathon and people get there and see people going 30, 40 miles on a horse and running, and they think, hey, I could do that too. That's a real possibility if we can get people out there to do that. Anyway, that was the running part. And I've got stories about running Western States. The last time I did it, there was an event that I've held on to in my head. I had come out of the first canyon, and which is like 50 miles in or something like that. And it was hot, and I was, shaky, not feeling real good. And I got to the aid station at Last Chance. And I sat down in a chair, and somebody brought a wet towel, threw it on my head, and brought over some potato chips that were salty. And in less than 5 minutes, I'm thinking, okay, I got to keep going. I got up and started going, and I'm by myself at that point. And I'm going away from the aid station, and several hundred yards up the road, and I'm, thinking, okay, legs feel okay. I'm breathing all right. I think I'm going to be all right as I head to the next canyon, and saw some movement in front of me, and out from behind a tree stepped a young woman wearing running shoes. And she said, go get them.
And that was she was wearing.
Right.
Pink running shoes. I do remember that. And I started giggling to myself as I went down into the next canyon and laughing and forgetting all about how my body had been feeling.
Yeah.
This isn't the end of the story. You come out of that canyon to get to
The next aid
the
station.
next egg station at Michigan Bluff. And as I'm going up there, I'm thinking, did I really see that?
Yeah.
And I got to the aid station, and I'm then changing my shoes and telling my crew about this. And there's a guy laying on a cot, another runner. He bolts upright and says, I saw her too. And he hadn't told anybody. Gone through the same thing in his head, I'm sure.
That's great. Oh, that's great.
That was interesting.
So you said something I didn't even think to ask about. When you said the last time I did the Western States, how many times have you done that?
3 times.
And completed all 3?
Yes, and
Wow.
each of them under 24 hours as well. But you talk about some of the riding tires, they're way better than I am. Jim Howard, for instance, he's wise and won the riding time many times.
Right.
So, those guys are in a different league altogether.
So have you done Tevis more than once?
No, I did Tevis time. And
Okay.
that was very interesting. I did it on Bones. And I think 91, and I didn't know all that much about it, but I had run the course, of course, 3 times by then, actually parts of it way more than 3 times, and ridden it, looking at parts of it. And there's a part where you go down from Forest Hill down to the river, where you're on a very narrow trail overlooking the river, and it's steep down to the river, several hundred yards probably, and straight down off the trail. And I ran that in the races. It was after dark, but I knew where it was, and I had a flashlight. Well, in the ride, they schedule the ride for a full moon. However, they don't let you know that the moon doesn't come up until about 1 in the morning. So I'm there on that trail riding Bones, and we're doing pretty well. And it's really dark. I can't see the ground while I'm sitting on him.
Mhm.
You know, he could see it perfectly fine. And as we're riding along, there's people coming up behind us. I can hear them coming, and Bones stops dead. I said, "Hey, Bones, come on, we got to get off the trail. We're in the way here, and those people are coming along." And he wouldn't move. And the people went by and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Hey, back."
Behind, they went by behind you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they kept going, and Bones backed up to the trail and pulled in behind him. And then I realized where I was, and I knew
Mhm.
he had gone out on a little promontory above where it dropped off to get off the trail to let him go by
On a
and then he-
switchback, right?
on a switchback, and he backed up to get back on the trail.
Yeah.
I learned to trust my horse.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of those things where we reckon that they are equal partners in so many ways, and we need to pay attention.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. So
And
Jeremy
we finished
Reynolds. Jeremy Reynolds is another Triple Crown winner, and I know that at Tevis, lots of times he will get off and run with the horse. Did you do that at Tevis by any chance?
I did. I ran probably 18 miles
Mhm.
Go-
Oh, wow.
on a downhill,
Mhm.
Yeah. right off the front of him like that, and
Mhm.
along, and he trotted along behind me. And when you do a ride and tie, the runner theoretically gets some rest while he's on the back of the horse.
Mhm.
It took me several years to learn how to rest while I was on the horse. I got Bones, and Bones was so smooth, it was easy to rest on him.
Yeah.
But that's kind of something you have to learn. But also going down a hill where, we can run pretty well, it gives them a break.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
just have to trot with no weight on them. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier on them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ended up about 18 miles, I think I figured out that I
Wow.
had run.
Wow. Neat.
But I want to go back to your original question, and that was, did he set out to achieve the Triple
Mhm.
Crown? He didn't even know about it back
Okay.
then. I didn't know
No, it
if
wasn't.
anybody had conceived that category. So
Right.
he set out to do all three events eventually, when he'd learn, he'd set his goal on that one, but he didn't know about that category.
Okay.
Actually,
Wow.
after I did Tevis, I kind of looked at some results, and I figured out I was probably one of 5 that had done all 3 at that point.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
But there's one of 5. Those other 2, Tom Johnson, Jim Howard, were there. They had done all 3, and they're in a different league.
Yeah. But hey, you've done it, man. I mean, don't
Yeah.
there's you've done it. Don't be humble about
Don't
that.
sell yourself short.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Annette, one of your lasting, eternal contributions to Ride and Die is the fact that you compiled and edited 40 years of madness, and then 10 years later, we drug you back into it, and you compiled and updated it for 50 years of madness. You showed us the book a minute ago. Every time I pick up that book, and I've been doing it lots lately, as I've been getting ready for working on the newsletter for the after this the 50th championship, I get stuck and I'm reading for just 30 minutes, and we're looking at pictures and reading and looking at all the things and everything. And so thank you so much for that book. Was it your idea, or did you get drafted into doing that initially?
Nobody dragged me into it. It was all my idea. So Don and Annie Betts. Don was president back in 2010, and I think he was president for like at least 5 years at that time. And Annie was doing the newsletter, and they were living in Washington at the time, I think, coming up to the 2010 race at Mount Adams. And it was about a year and a half prior to that. They were traveling with their horses, so they stopped at our place and spent the night. And we were just sitting around talking, and I opened my big mouth and I said, we have a 40-year anniversary of this sport coming up. Seems like we ought to do something really special. And, Don goes, sure, go ahead. And I thought, well, what could be? I kept thinking about it. And I thought of all the times that we've sat around either together or with friends, and we'd be chatting about a race of together, and we'd go, and what year was that when you ran past the horse and we missed the gate at the turn at the gate, and blah blah blah, whatever. And I thought, I wonder if it's possible to find all the old race results somewhere and put it all together. And, and so that's how the idea of the book came about. And Bud was still very much alive and vital at that time and living in San Francisco. And so I got in touch with him. Bud John's the founder of our sport. I just want to make sure everybody understands who Bud is. And he lived in this great old 3-story Victorian in San Francisco. And the bottom story was the garage, but it was full of Bud's archives, boxes and boxes of stuff from 40 years of riding. Or actually, most of it was from the 70s and 80s, because Lee sponsored up until 87, I think. And then 88, the association, newly formed, took it. And but Bud was still involved and would come and start the races. Anyway, he was very excited about the idea. And so he gave me full access to all those boxes. And I managed to find out from his boxes and some from other people in the sport. I think Steve Shaw, Mary Tiscornia, I don't remember who all, Ruprex. And I pulled race results from a whole bunch of different sources. It took me about 1.5 years to actually put that book together. Not full-time 1.5 years, but a lot of hours over that 1.5 years. Put the race results together. Another woman, Mary Ann Buxton, at that time why she did this, I don't know, but I'm really grateful she did, had compiled a collection of JPEG files of all of the race posters every year, because that's been a tradition in Ride and Tie. Every year there's been a flyer, and pre-internet, they were great big, heavy, glossy posters that would be distributed and posted everywhere anybody could think of to post these. And so I had about 30 years of those, I think. And I grabbed the last 10 years worth from various people, newsletter editors and other people that had created the flyers once the internet came out. Anyway, put it all together. Then I realized, oh gosh, there's more than race results. There's stories and there's pictures. And so Bud had a huge archive of old photos. And we sent out in the association to every member and past member, we sent out postcards calling for photos and stories. And I was disappointed I didn't get a bigger response than I did, but I was grateful I got some, including Jim Larimer, who was on the winning team with Hal Hall that first Ride and Tie in 1971. So he sent me a small blurb and a photo, I think, of that. There might be a photo of him. I think there is, that he sent. And anyway, short story long, I put all these things in a spreadsheet. And by this time, the association, I believe it was Steve Anderson then, who had started compiling race results and records in a spreadsheet. So it took a lot of cross-referencing sheets to compile the statistics that are in the book, the number of completions. And not all of that is even in there. Some of it was just people I knew I would get information from. So it was a lot of different sources. And I apologize if people find that they did a Ride and Tie championship one year, but they don't find themselves in the race results. I did have Don and Annie review my transcription from the old hard copy tractor feed or handwritten results into the tables that are in the book. And there's no question, I'm sure we've missed a few. I hope not very many, but anyway, my apologies. And if that's the case, there is an email address, history@rideandtie.org, that still should be forwarding to me. I haven't gotten anything in a while, so I hope it is. If somebody finds errors in the book, let me know, because I can edit the manuscript, and then if the association ever orders any more, we will have it updated. So anyway, it was my idea. Then the 50th came along, and of course, I had to. update for the last 10 years. And I, thank goodness I started working on that when Bud was still with us. He passed away in, I think it was January or February of 2019. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I had him write, he wrote a foreword for the first book. He wrote another foreword for this book. And he was very pleased that we were doing that I was doing this book, and I had so much help from so many people. The other thing I want to point out is that if anybody ever wants to go through some of the key 6 boxes or so of his archives, they're housed in the library at what used to be Humboldt State University, my old alma mater in Arcata, California, on the North Coast. It's now called Cal Poly Humboldt. We just changed that. But so those archives are there, and there are, somebody just needs to go there and ask to see them. And they are supposed to be still on the newsletter receiving list, so they should have all the newsletter issues and all of that as well. That was it. And the title, like I said earlier, came from Bud John's initial book called "What Is This Madness?" about the sport that he created. So
and both books are great. I own both of them, and I had to buy used copies of Bud's book, but I've got 2 of his, and they're still available if you hunt long enough for it. But anyway, you were going to say something, Jim?
Yeah, she has done an amazing job. There was stuff all over the floor when we were going through this, and to let you know, both she and I still pull the book out every once in a while and do the same thing too. Wow, and we get lost in it for a half an hour or an hour or so. Yeah, so valuable.
Go ahead.
I'd say 2 quick personal stories from me in the book. Working on the newsletter this year, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment. But the winning team this year was a woman team, and so I wonder, is this the first one or not? And so I made the mistake of starting back in '71 and working my way forward. And when I finally got to the first woman team, you had a note there saying this is the first woman team, because I was looking at every race all the way up, but you had already taken care of that. I should have started at the end and worked my way backwards. And the other is coming soon, hopefully, to a video near you. Don Betts wrote a Riding Tie song, and I have given that song to a friend of mine, and they are actually working on hopefully we're going to make it 4-part harmony, and either have an a cappella choir or another choir sing that, and I will record it, and it may just be a solo. They're still working on it some, but that song, and it's in the book. That's the reason I'm telling you this. I hope that we will get it and actually be able to use it because the words are just so perfect for Riding Tie. He obviously just captured it. And so hopefully that'll be coming in the next 2 or 3 months, and maybe even earlier, I hope. So anyway, just wanted you to know just 2 really neat things. If it weren't for the book, it wouldn't happen. So yeah.
That's great. Awesome. So there are some old videos, some of which are public domain, but some of which are copyrighted. And so unfortunately we can't share them out unless somebody wants to really bird dog that. In 1989 Fraser Park, what was it? Some sports channel. I apologize, I can't remember which sports channel back then, filmed it and interviewed a lot of the riding tires with professional commentary. It was very well done.
Wow.
And then Bud Johns wrote the script for one that they created in 1973 or 76. I can't remember. That's a fabulous one. And I believe since he was with Levi's at the time, they probably still own copyright. So we can't release that. But I wish somebody could pursue that option, maybe being able to release those not for profit or whatever.
Right.
To share with the world, because there's some others as well, but they're fabulous.
Well, that's good to know. We'll have to work on that later, because we do now have a YouTube Riding Tie Association channel, and so to have that on there would be great. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
think I mentioned this in the book. Did you go seek it out? The episode of the Waltons.
Yes.
That featured. But they called it Run and Ride. But
right. Yeah. And then There was a some movie recently somebody put on the Facebook page that also had, and they called it Right in Time. That, but I can't remember the name of the movie now, but I did watch it. But anyway, yeah,
Really?
yes,
Huh.
yes. I have to go back and find it
Wow.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
find out what it is. Let me know.
Yeah, with the Waltons, if anybody wants to see that, I actually bought it through YouTube. So you go search Waltons. I forget how you're going to find it, but if you search hard enough, you can find it. It's a great episode, and that's where a woman team beats a man team, which is kind of fun
I
too. So,
remember that. Yeah.
Well, I think they didn't actually beat them. This is
oh, maybe
back in the 70s or 80s when that episode aired, and of course, women beating men back in those.
not.
But they almost did.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
good story. And they called it Run and Ride. So if you Google Walton TV series Run and Ride,
I think you would find it.
Run, I think you can find it.
Good. Well, let's shift gears again and now talk a little bit about this year. This year was the 50th championship, and it was a long time coming because a global pandemic slowed us up a little bit. We shift venues a couple of times until we finally got it, but it happened, and by all accounts, it was a great success. I want to talk first about the way you two competed, because you competed a little differently this year, and then we'll talk about some of the other stuff about the actual ride and tie. But y'all did the Equathon, and I like to call Equathon the gateway drug into ride and tie. And Jim, you even mentioned earlier that you thought maybe that is going to help, because if you're a runner and you're not a rider, or you're a rider not a runner, you can still do Equathon. Y'all didn't need the gateway drug. You've been addicts for a long time. But just from your perspective, tell me kind of what Equathon is, in case somebody needs to know what Equathon is, and then tell me about your experiences with it this year as you did it together.
Sure. Well, Equathon is, and I think Susan Smythe and some others were instrumental in coming up with this concept. The ride and tie competition, the number of teams each year was dwindling, and we were really searching for a way to get more people to, into the sport, keep it going. And so they came up with this idea of, let's have a biathlon that involves running and riding. And it could be a team relay, or it could be an iron person. And she told this story actually this year at the championship, that they decided to do that. It'd be a good way to get runners there, and endurance riders, or even trail riders who just want to know what it's all about. So they ended up batting around a few names and settled on Equathon, because that brings the equus into the equation, the horse. And so anyway, it's usually involves the rider riding a specified loop of 10, 15 miles, whatever. There's not a set distance. Each race director creates their own course. And then the runner will go out and run either the same course or maybe a little bit shorter course. And so Jim and I both have had some physical issues and some health issues over the past 5-10 years. And that's why I haven't been as involved in ride and tie as I once was in terms of competing. And Jim did the 2019 Regional Western Championship with George Hall up here in Oregon, and hurt his back really badly. And that took over a year to even get, he was able to run, thank God, all those years he was able to run. But now he's able to do more, not back 100%, but riding is a little bit hard for him. And then a month after that, he got a cancer diagnosis. So he went through treatment for throat cancer. And anyway, long story, he's doing great. He's 3 years cancer free at this point. So we're just, I mean, he's 80. He's amazing. He is a superhero, even if he won't admit it. But anyway, so the 50th championship, it's 7 hours away from us. We figure we really want to participate, and we knew we were going to go. And I thought, well, I'll take my horse. I can help flag trail or unmark it or whatever. And then I said, well, one of us said, why don't we do the Equathon? Because he can run. He's been running. He runs with his buddies 4 times a week at least. So, and I'm still doing trail riding and maybe an LD here and there, limited distance endurance ride. So we decided to do that. and it was a way for us to participate as competitors. So it was fun, I have to say, and I actually kind of enjoyed not having to get off and run. He probably enjoyed not having to get on and ride, because my horse that I have now is not the smoothest. She's not the smoothest. And so it was really fun. We're glad we did it. But and we were by far our combined, we were the oldest team out there in the long course equithon. We can brag about that now that we're really old.
Yeah.
But there is one thing I have to say, and while it was fun finishing, you don't finish as a team.
Right.
We all crossed the finish line together, and it did not have that element of exhilaration that tie finishes have, and I missed that. And at the pre-race meeting the night after the equithon, we had our banquet and awards, and then the pre-race ride and tie meeting was that night, and we were sitting there listening to Sequoia and talk about and Dr. Greg Fellers, and I looked over at him and I whispered, "Doesn't it make you wish we were doing the ride and tie?" Yeah. But I'm not sure that's in our future anymore, but I mean, never say never. So
and that is why I call it the gateway drug. It's not as good as the drug. It's just it's the one that gets you into it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
but it is fun, and if that's all people want to do, that's great. It helps support.
Absolutely. Yep.
The entry, all the entry fees help support us.
Absolutely. What were the distances for the long course in the equithon?
Equithon, it was 10-mile ride, 10-mile run on the same course. So, so it was, and I think because it was supposed to be so hot that day, it was predicted to be 95, and I think it got pretty close to that, actually. They, Sequoia made the decision to, and Greg, Dr. Fellers, made the decision to allow the runners to start a half an hour after the riders. Wasn't quite a relay this time. And then by adding the times together, we still got the same time we would have gotten, but at least the runners weren't out there in the heat of the day quite as much, except for
Carolyn Latham.
Yes.
Tell us about her.
So Carolyn Latham came to the race. She was going to do the equithon with her mother, and her father was going to do it with, and I don't know if it was her husband or brother. I'm not sure who that other man partner of her father was, but apparently he got sick or for some reason couldn't make it. I don't know all the details. So Carolyn, she must be just an awesome runner because she looked great out there. Ran the 10-mile loop for her mother, and then she ran it again for her father. So she competed, she ran that thing twice. She ran 20 miles and completed the run for two teams. That's pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. And both of those stories about slightly altering the rules at the beginning and telling Carolyn, yeah, if you want to run twice, we'll let you run twice. That's another thing that I love about Ride and Tie is that we're serious about the sport, and we don't want to compromise the sport. But if we can find ways to adjust and adapt to make it better for everybody, we do that. And I love that. That doesn't happen in a lot of the sports as well. Yeah.
Right.
Well, day two, Saturday was the long course, and you guys were through competing, but you weren't through with your assignments. You had two kind of neat ones. Annette, if you want another career, you can go into a career in sports broadcasting, because your narration of the start of the race I thought was so wonderful. And I was back here on the East Coast watching the start and just loving hearing you tell those stories. And you so primed me. I don't even, it's not even a confession. It's just when that race started, I started crying because it was so exciting. But that was because of you. And so then, as you know, I kind of edited out it so we could just have your commentary in there and put that on the Ride and Tie Association channel. So that was your job, official race start commentator. And then, Jim, you were the official starter for the race. And yet, as often happens in Ride and Tie, it didn't start exactly the way that everybody planned. Tell me a little bit of how the start went.
Well, it didn't go badly at all, I don't think. it was supposed to, we had to set our clocks so that you all the finishing. And that's all right. We could always adjust that in any event. You could go back to the finish and I could use my watch for whatever. But what happened was Sequoia's husband,
Eli. Awesome.
was there. He did a lot of work. He was there at the start and he announced several times, 4 minutes till the start. And I'm thinking, that's not exactly right. And then 2 minutes to the start, but I couldn't reach him to tell him, wait a minute, we got to adjust this. And so in between that 2 minutes and the start, I'm at the starting line or just beyond it. And there was one horse that was kind of whirling around.
That white horse.
The white horse.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said, okay, we're going to go and put the hat, in the air, it was across the line, but it was with its back to the course. So it doesn't matter. At this point,
Sure.
They got miles to go. Things will change and nobody's going to finish that close to anybody else anyway.
Right.
Go. And
So-
it's been all right.
I couldn't see that from where I was. I couldn't see that he actually did toss the hat in the air. And so I missed that entirely. But I have to say, thank you for all your kudos and really thank you for your editing on that video because it made it so much more watchable. But I was asked to do that about 20 minutes before the start.
Wow.
We had to get out there about 20. I was asked to do it about an hour before the start. So I didn't know I wasn't prepared. And if I had been, so anyway, next time I'll do a better job. It was really, really fun. And I was really glad that David Lewis, the race photographer, had the Starlink uplink, the technology to allow us to do that. And I want to thank you for popping on right away and saying, hey, good morning. Good to see you. Thank you for doing this. What's the weather like? Because that really got me going.
That was really exciting. Right away, the news was among us all. Hey, the East Coast is watching this.
Yeah.
That was cool.
And you and Sarah and a few others got on and were asking questions, which really helped.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah, my focus and prompted some of the commentary, and so I really appreciate that. And you did an awesome job editing it, so thank you.
Well, and just to plug it, not because of the editing, but because of you, we do have a Riding Tie Association YouTube channel. And so if you just go to YouTube and search for Riding Tie Association, right now, that's the first video that'll pop for you because it's the last one that we put up. And it's it's about 13 minutes long. It's well worth every minute of that. So, yeah. Any other stories from this year that the 50th that you want to tell?
Other than we wish we had been able to compete in it. Just that I really think Sequoia came through. She kept trying to put it on for 3 years and we finally got to do it. And she struggled through that whole time. Two false starts, and finally. So there's always a few hitches and glitches in any big race or any event like that some you put on. And so not any of which were her fault and not any of which were major. So I think she did an amazing job, and I hope she will consider being a race director again someday. But what else can we think about this year's race?
Well, it's not necessarily about this year's race, but I want to go back to when you first started this Zoom meeting and your daughter got you and started in Riding Tie. And my feelings about Riding Tie are that it's a family affair.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's your daughter, your wife or husband, or a close family member that way, but your horse is part of your family too. Indeed. And when you finish these things, that is such a thrill to be able to do it with someone that you love.
Yeah.
And that's a big part. Yeah. It's a part that you don't have with an endurance ride or an endurance run necessarily, but it's part of your family, part of your loved one. And
Yep. Oh, that's
Bigger.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Oh, speaking of family, there is a comment about this year's championship.
Mhm.
I'm really proud of Jennifer Titus and Priscilla.
Oh, yeah.
Not sure how to pronounce her last name.
Anderson.
And I thought it was Drager. Had her mixed up. Priscilla Anderson and Jennifer Titus, who finished on Jennifer's amazing horse mare, Missy, who I think is 18 or 20 years old.
She has 3 Tevis, or at least 2 Tevises under her belt from a previous owner.
So they finished 2-woman team, and they're from Grants Pass, Oregon, just right, here where we live. And Jim and I hosted a little riding. We're mentors in the Oregon area, and haven't had anybody to mentor in recent years. But about a decade ago, we did host a little clinic here at our place, and Jennifer and her son Bear came and did that clinic. So we taught her how to ride and tie, and she did the championship that year with her son. But I think they had a stone bruise or something, couldn't complete. But she's back, and she's a cancer survivor, and they won it. Yeah. So I'm proud of them. So
I've already had a chance to talk to both of them, and they are so excited about it. And Priscilla, that was her first ever riding tie.
Right, that's right.
She bought a horse about a year ago, and somebody mentioned her riding tie, and then she happened to bump into Priscilla, and they were just sort of acquaintances. And Priscilla said, "Let's do this thing," or Jim said, "Let's do this thing," and they did, and then this is actually the second world championship in a row where one of the members was their very first race. One of the winners was the very first race, which is kind of cool.
Awesome.
Because the same thing happened back here in the East in 49. Of course, way back when, that probably happened lots, because the first year everybody was a rookie.
Right. Right.
But still, that's just really neat. And to have that woman team, I think, is neat. And I'm still trying, as you know, I'm trying to track down. They were on Missy, who's a mare, so they may be the first all-female team. I haven't been able to track down yet the other horse, if it was.
And you may not, because I don't know if that's been that wasn't tracked in the database.
Right. Yeah.
But something you said. We also had some other highlights from this year.
Oh, please.
Really hoping more old timers would be there, but we did have some, including Pat Browning at 82 or 83, competed in the long course riding tie with Rufus Schneider, and they finished. And Pat's amazing. We've been riding tying with him for as long as we've been doing riding tie, and he put on a few down in the center part of the Gold Country in the Sierra Nevada back in the 80s and 90s, and we did some of those. And Rufus, of course, she's a machine. She's a running machine. And she puts on a lot of runs down in her area in San Diego County. Chuck Stolley came this year and crewed for his daughter, Alyssa Stolley, or I don't know what her married name is now, who competed with her husband, or partnered with her husband, and they did well. So it was just, and George Hall, of course, he's now a ride and tie icon, like Mary Tiscornia. And if he can get, I think he's only got to get 2 more completions, he'll tie with her number of championship completions. So far, she's held the world record forever.
Yeah. Given that we're flip-flopping east and west now, that's probably going to be a record that will never be beaten. Once whoever ends up with it, they'll probably hold it forever, because it's going to be really hard. Which is really neat.
Never say never.
That's
maybe
right.
Between the east and the west, we can keep this thing going another 15 years.
Yep. I'd like to mention, a lot of us in the East were planning to come, and the pandemic just blew us out of the water, and then diesel prices went up, and that's one of my only regret I have for this 50th was I don't know that you had any East Coasters there, and it wasn't for lack of interest or love or the sport or anything else. It was just, we just couldn't happen. Even
that would have been awesome.
Yeah, even airline tickets we were talking about, they were $1,200 because the airlines are so crazy right now to get out there, and so we just couldn't do it. But anyway, I'm glad we got to. I'm so glad it got live streamed to start, and we've got to participate in other ways. And like you say, never say never. We need to do more together. So yeah.
There was a woman, Sherry Reimers or Reimers. I'm not sure how she pronounces her last name. And I think I'm correct. I should look in the book.
Mhm.
I think she came out from Texas
Uh-huh.
in the 2010 race at Mount Adams. And she was here this year. And if I remember right, they announced that she had come from Belize. So
Wow.
yes, Sherry Reimers
Yeah.
competed. Actually, she completed the World Championship in Mount Adams in 2010. And she was here this year from Belize.
Wow. Well, she gets the record for coming the furthest, I'm sure. Yeah.
Furthest traveled,
Wow.
absolutely, yes.
Wow. Neat, neat, neat. Well, in lots of ways, we've already done this today, but I want to give you one more shot. If somebody is thinking about doing ride and tie, what would your encouragement or your advice be to them?
I'll answer that first. From my perspective, anybody can do this. You don't have to be a good runner to be a good horse person. You'll learn more than once, but it's a team effort. It's truly a team effort. And talking about Pat Browning, you don't think he should be able to run. It shouldn't give him a chance to run.
He's had knees replaced.
Yeah.
He's had some issues with his knees and legs, so he's pretty amazing.
But he always rides a fast horse.
Uh-huh.
So, you use what you've got, and you don't have to have a lot to start with, but anybody can do it if they want to. And it's such a challenge. It's a mental challenge and a physical challenge. And extremely exciting, and it can be a family affair, as you know.
Yes.
George Hall has had both hips replaced. So, and I guess I would echo that, but I from my perspective, it was not something I ever thought I could do. Doing endurance riding, and I wasn't a runner until I started training for my first ride and tie in '83. And I even after I had done quite a few, if I knew something about the course, like Taylorsville and Cuneo Creek are both really tough courses in high country. And every year when we would be entered in one of those, I would be just apprehensive, can I do this, guy? And all I could want to say is you can, you test yourself and you push yourself to the limits, but you learn. You can push yourself, and there's things you can do you never thought you could do.
Yep.
So it's a good metaphor for life.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a great way to end. So thank you so much for letting me do this and record this, and we'll put this out so that everybody can see it. And I thank you guys so very, very much. And
well, thank you, Courtney, for doing it.